Hi everyone. I didn't realize today was Women's Equality Day, and I got an email in my inbox from one of my vendors saying like, "Oh, Happy Women's Equality Day," or celebrating Women's Equality Day. So I actually didn't check if it was, so I'm just kind of going with it. But I have a lot to say about women's equality, especially after working in the oil and gas industry for 19 years, um, and like working with men the majority of my life, and growing up with all brothers. I do have a sister, but she didn't come out until I was 16 years old. So majority of my life I grew up with boys around me, and I always felt like boys had life easier, right? I mean, like bathroom, like boys don't have to sit down, boys don't have to wipe every time. They can just whip it out and pee anywhere, right? I digress, and I'm just making fun. But in the family that I grew up in, my brothers had it way easier than I had, right? I was under the guise that, oh, you're a woman, you're going to have to take care of a family, so you have to learn how to clean, do chores, do all the housekeeping things around the house, because one day I would have to raise my family. And I saw my brothers, they didn't have to do any of that. And I mean, I kind of thought that, I mean, that's cool and all, and maybe it's true, maybe it's not true. I mean, of course, right? I am a wife and a mom today, so I do understand that, yes, wives and moms, we do have duties that we don't have, that men don't get to do. I mean, right? And we birth babies, we feed babies from our boobs, all the things, right? When kids get hurt, they usually want their moms, you know. So there's that. And then so why I'm so passionate about women's equality is, one, when I was 20 years old, I was recently divorced. I had a 1-year-old boy. My ex-husband kind of skirted the child support issue, so I didn't have any child support for my son while we were growing up. Like, he was at that age, and my stepmom was like, you should apply for the refinery, and you should go and and just apply, because you're good at taking tests. And I got high scores on my SATs, and my ASVAB was really high as well. And so she's like, you're good at taking tests. A lot of people don't make it because they have to pass the test. So when I applied, I think there was about 800 or so people that applied. They were only accepting 8 people. So what is that, 1%? So they only took 1% of that, of all the applicants at that time. So that was back in 1999. And back then they had to hire at least one female in that hiring class, so I was the one. And it was kind of between me and this other lady, but she had lied on her application about something, or so. I mean, I don't know for sure, but that's what I heard through the grapevine, that they chose me because they had to hire one female, and the other lady had lied on her application. And they didn't want actually to hire me because I came to the interview dressed in a skirt. At the time, I was working retail, so right, I worked in the lingerie department at Sears. So I went from working minimum wage jobs, because I was at home with my son during the day. I was going to night school. I was in the military already at this point. I joined the military at age 17 as a mental health specialist. And so but I wasn't full-time, I was just National Guard, right? So I was working like 3 jobs, stayed home with my son during the day, and then I was living home with my parents. And I couldn't get, not Social Security, I couldn't get financial support from the government like food stamps and whatever, because I was living at home with my parents and I was under the age of 22. So I was disqualified from that. So that's what, not forced me, but I applied to work in the oil refinery and I got the job. I didn't know what it was all about. Granted, I was not cut out for that job. I am an ENFP. If you're into the Myers-Briggs, the personality types, majority of the people in the refinery are ISTJ. Or just we had a leadership class, like when later in the career, we were going through all these leadership trainings and things, and we took like a shortened version of the Myers-Briggs at a leadership training that we had, and we all had to kind of like just write a check mark in the box that we were of the 16 personalities, and there were only 2 people, me and someone else who was ENFP. Everyone else was ISTJ. So, right, ENFP is total opposite of ISTJ. All of that to say, right, I went and I got the job because I was an affirmative action hire. And like my whole career there, it's like I felt like I had to constantly prove myself. I felt like I had to work twice as hard, and I'm small framed. I am 5'3". I'm 100 and something pounds. But when I started, I was like, people were like, "Are you even over 100 pounds?" But I had to lift 50-pound bags of chemicals. I had to climb these tall ladders and towers, and like there's a lot of physical labor, manual labor that I had to do when I first started working there. And they actually put me working in a plant that was harder than any of the other plants, the one with the most physical labor at the time. Eventually we automated a lot of stuff, so it was like one of the least physical jobs when I left, but when I started it was the most physical. And I heard through the grapevine that they put me there to weed me out. And I was like, okay. I mean, I grew up with brothers, so I was used to having to, be one of the boys. Even like my friends at school were all boys. I was a tomboy. The neighborhood kids that I would play with, they were all boys too. I would play Barbies for a time, but I hated the cattiness of females, and I couldn't stand the gossip and the backbiting that would happen in my female friend circles. So I used to hang out with tomboys or just boys. So being one of the boys, it wasn't a problem for me, but I just didn't like feeling judged my whole career. And like when I had a baby, right, I had a son before I joined, and then I had a baby in my second year. And so it's a 3-year training process working in the refinery, and I had a baby. And when I went out on maternity leave and I came back, they actually put me to a different crew. And it was, like it just felt like they didn't know how to deal with females, really. And luckily I ended up with a great boss at the time, and who was a little bit more laid back and like didn't really judge me for who I was. And over time I was able to build credibility. I was able to use my brain and not so much brawn as I was learning and going through the ranks, or going up the ranks in the company. And so it's like I finally got to a place where I was a leader. Like I had men reporting to me, and men who sought me out as a resource. Because I was able to look at a project or pieces of a project and create plans, create processes, and of course I had a lot of administrative skills as a female. I type as fast as people could talk, so I could transcribe meetings and stuff. And so not I kind of defaulted into being like an admin role for the operations department where I was. And so operations, we made all of the petroleum products, and so that's part of where I was. And then I got diagnosed with adrenal burnout, and it was like all the hard work that I had done and all the credibility that I had earned over the years, I got blackballed again. And it was kind of like, well, she like, and I was seeing a naturopath at the time. 2-3 years before I got my diagnosis, I switched from regular like Western medicine to a naturopath. But he came from Western medicine. He was the head of like the medical school at the University of Hawaii, and he had his own practice, and he went from Western medicine to Eastern. So the part that I loved was he's covered by insurance. So I'm like, oh, I can get a naturopath but still have it covered by insurance. So that was part of the what I liked about his practice. And I only started going to him because drinking coffee and like where in the operations department we had to work 2 weeks of days, 2 weeks of nights, and we would flip. So my body was flipping days to nights every 2 weeks for the last 17 years at this point. And I didn't know what I didn't know. My periods are also like very bad. I don't technically have PCOS. I've never got tested for fibroids, but there's some months where I'm incapacitated. I just did a Facebook Live about finding your feminine flow in my Facebook group. If you want to join that, click up the link in the header. And so even when it was that time of the month and I would get hit with migraines, I would get hit with like major fatigue, major brain fog. Like the men could not understand it. And I mean, this is on my public page, but I'm heavy flow. So, when you lose that much, especially on your first or second day, on day 2, it's heavy. Like iron level's not there. So it really affected my physical body, but because I was in like a manual labor position, or not that, having lack of physical stamina was an issue, so I got judged for that. No. Okay, I'm back. My husband called, so anyway, where was I? I was talking about just the inconsistencies between like men and women in the workplace, especially in the oil and gas industry, right? And it's super competitive as far as getting promotions and things. And it was just really hard. And I'm really not trying to play the victim game, but it was sometimes the discrepancy was so blatant. I'm like, do you guys even understand what you are doing? Because it's so obvious. Yeah. But all I really want to say is that when I got my adrenal fatigue diagnosis, there was I was out on medical leave. There was another guy who had pancreatic cancer, and he was out on medical leave. And so I just wanted to leave you with this piece about women's equality. So I'm not like dissing anyone who has had cancer, but if you look at adrenals and like what was happening in my body with adrenal burnout, it's invisible, right? You can't see it. And so that's what my coworkers were talking about. It's like, oh, she doesn't look sick, so why is she out on medical leave? that was happening. And then there's the guy with cancer. We were out on medical leave at the same time. Can you guess? The man got all the sympathy. Oh, you have cancer. Oh, we should be so like, oh, you shouldn't do that, or you shouldn't do that. You have cancer. You have cancer. You have cancer. And I'm like, because their issue was I don't look sick. I didn't look sick at the time. I'm like, I'm not trying to be sick. My doctor is the one that's telling me I can't work. In order for my adrenals to heal, I had to rest a certain amount of hours a day, and my shift was 12 hours. So, right, if I'm at work for 12 hours, there's no way I can sleep for 10 hours and have my body recover. There's just no physical way, which was why I was out on medical leave. So, it was just, I'm like, but at this time, I was already 17 years in the industry, so I understood. I was like, it wasn't a big deal for me. But it was just cancer, adrenal burnout. They're both invisible illnesses, but yet mine was not acceptable. And another factor was when men would walk in to the office, I was there, and then there's other men there. They would automatically gravitate to the man and ask if he was in charge. They would ask him for advice, even though I was the boss at the time. They would automatically gravitate to the man and be like, "Hey, I'm here to check out this and that. Like, can you help me?" And these were like external contractors who didn't know who I was, didn't know like me from the next guy. So it was fine. But I would just laugh at the assumption it would happen every single time. And it got worse when I was the boss. Right? It was worse when I was the boss and people were reporting to me, but they would go to it was like I was already 15 years in, and then they would go to a man who was still a trainee just because he was a man. And I look very young as well. Right now, I'm in my 40s, so I was in my 30s at the time. I get it. Asian don't raisin. I look young. So naturally, they would just go to the man, ask the man for help, and then it would just be very hilarious. I would just kind of like wait for it, like, oh, I'm not the boss, she's the boss. And then they would like be so apologetic, like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I didn't know that you're the boss. I'm like, it's okay. I was already in the business for like over 10 years at this point, so it's like, whatever, it's fine, I'm used to it. So I just wanted to share my story about women's equality and having to fight for it in the workplace. And this is just to share with any of you women out there who have, one, if you resonate with what I'm saying, I'd love to get some hearts on this. Like if you felt discriminated against, or maybe not like blatant discrimination, but just judged for being a female, having boobs, and so I would try and like flatten my chest as much as possible. Like I was so ashamed of having boobs, like my boobs getting in the way of doing my job. I didn't I was surrounded by men like all day, and some were like coworkers, some were contractors, and it was like working at a construction zone. It was a total meat market, and you would never see me wear makeup to work. You would never see me in earrings on the job. Like, no way. Like, every ounce of femininity I shied away from. I did. And because I was in that patriarchal system for so long, and I said we took all these leadership courses, and they're very masculine. And even when I got into entrepreneurship, all the leaders and like how to have the best entrepreneur life. It's either you're a stay-at-home mom who's like side hustling, or you're a full-blown entrepreneur who is crushing it, like, but all of that crushing energy is very masculine. And I was like, I can't, like, there was no in between. And it's why I created the Facebook group Fierce Feminine CEOs, because I feel like having lost myself and my femininity for 19 years and having to reclaim that, but still being the leader, still being the boss, and still like owning it and crushing it in this entrepreneurial game, it's a passion of mine, and I want you to have that as well. So if you're not in there, join the Facebook group. There's a link in the cover photo. Go ahead and join that. The group is all about how to stay in flow as a fierce feminine CEO, where kind of like a yin and yang, where all the leadership stuff that I learned working in a very patriarchal environment. I don't even know if I'm saying that word correctly. If I'm not, let me know. But yeah, being a very patriarchal environment where I was judged, and now I'm out, I'm doing my own thing, hanging out with a lot of fierce feminine women. So is that like a double? But right, a lot of fierce women out here crushing it, and these are my soul sisters. These are like my biz besties. We're side by side crushing it every day, and I just want you to have that. And so here's to women's equality. Like, yay. Thank you for the women who've gone before us, who allowed me to have the job, even if it was an affirmative action hire. But just thankful for the women who were trailblazers before us, before me, before you, to go out there and lead the way for us women. And just, we're coming for you, we're coming. So stay fierce, stay feminine, and I'll see you on the inside.